These are the top 10 most brutal moments in Attack on Titan. In the number 10 spot, we have when Zeke gets saved by a Titan in Season 4 after he blew himself and Levi up. Seeing the Titan just rip open its chest was a very gruesome sight and was definitely not for the faint-hearted viewer. And just in case that in itself wasn't horrifying enough, it then proceeds to tuck Zeke away inside of its guts in order to protect him as he healed. I think many fans forgot about this scene, however, it definitely deserves a spot among the most brutal moments in the show. The female Titan was definitely involved in her fair share of brutal scenes, but this one was on a whole different level. When she appears for the first time in Season 1, we see a group of scouts attempting to take her down. Obviously they fail, but the manner in which they did so was a very difficult watch. She grabs onto one of the soldiers and proceeds to spin him around in circles extremely quickly, causing him to completely fold in half, and ultimately result in his instant death. It was truly haunting to watch. Next we have the scouts' final charge and the return to Shiganshina arc in Season 3. I don't think there's a single AOT fan who doesn't remember just how devastating this scene was. It showed us practically all of the scouts aside from the new Levi squad being shredded by large boulders traveling at insanely fast speeds right towards them. Even before their death, seeing the sort of wall of houses that they were using for cover slowly getting flattened towards them was also truly horrifying, especially paired up with Erwin's speech and just the atmosphere among the remaining recruits. It was definitely not a way you wanted to meet your end. In number 7 is the death of the OG Levi squad. This one is probably the main reason as to why many people really dislike Annie. It's a very gruesome sequence. Each of the members meet their ends in equally brutal ways. To name them, Gunter gets slashed by Annie's swords when she's out of her Titan. She then transforms and quickly bites Eld in half, but it doesn't just stop there. While Petra's stuck in a state of shock, Annie kicks her right into a tree, and Oruo just gets booted. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that this deserves an appearance on this list. Next up we have Grisha's sister Faye's death. While we don't see much of how her death actually happened, it doesn't make it any less brutal. After Grisha and her get caught roaming outside the walls in Marley, one of the officers says he's going to take her back home as Grisha is getting beaten up for his and her punishment. However, as we know, this doesn't end up happening as she is instead fed alive to the officer's son's dogs. Now we've seen quite a few different ways of dying in the world of Attack on Titan, but I think this one has to be up there as one of the worst, despite not being anything related to Titans. In the number 5 spot, we have when we see Kaya's mum being eaten alive. The worst part about this one is that as a result of the Titan being so small, it was unable to eat her in one whole bite, meaning that it ended up just slowly eating her little by little until eventually, although we don't see it, she assumingly bleeds out. This is definitely one of the worst ways we've seen someone go out in the show, simply due to the fact that it was excruciatingly slow. This also all happened right in front of Kaya's eyes, which cements this one as by far one of the most brutal deaths in the show. In number 4, we have Nanaba's death. This couldn't be a brutal moments in Attack on Titan list without including Nanaba's death. I don't know what it is about these side characters, but Isayama clearly gets something out of having them die in the worst ways imaginable. This one happens at Utgard Castle in Season 2, and it is truly horrifying. Having defended off a bunch of Titans already, her gas eventually runs out. Unfortunately, when this happens, she wasn't in the safest place she could have possibly been in. She gets grabbed by a group of Titans and is essentially pulled apart by them, all while reliving the trauma of her being abused by her father when she was a kid. I don't think anyone will be forgetting about this scene anytime soon. Season 4 is full of gruesome moments, but this one is by far one of the most memorable. Not only because it was the moment where Eren managed to get his hands on the Warhammer Titan, but also due to the fact that it was just absolutely brutal to watch. Eren realizes that the Jaw Titan has the ability to break the Warhammer's crystal, so he proceeds to rip the Jaw's limbs off and use him as a literal nutcracker in order to crack it open. A very smart play, I have to say, but definitely a rough one for Galliard and Lara Tiber. In the number 2 spot, we have another one from Season 4, that being Ramsey's death. Although his death was the same as a very large percentage of the world in AOT, his one was the one that we got to see a bit more in depth of. For those of you who don't know, Ramsey was crushed by one of the Colossal Titans during the rumbling, after having his leg crushed by a boulder right after he watched his little brother also get crushed by a flying boulder. I don't even need to say much more. This moment deserves its spot in the top 2 to say the very least. Right before we get onto number 1, please consider subscribing. I'll be doing a face reveal at 100k subs, which we are super close to hitting. And if you made it this far into the video already, an extra couple seconds won't hurt. Anyway, back to number 1. And of course in the number 1 one spot, we have the death of Miche in Season 2. This one was probably the most infamous brutal moment in the entire show. I guarantee that every person who has seen the show would look back at this moment in horror, and rightly so. It was terrifying. The sequence starts with the Beast Titan lobbing a horse right at Miche, causing him to get launched off the roof, then land on the ground in the middle of a group of Titans. Just as one of them takes a bite, the Beast Titan orders the Titan to stop, leaving him stuck inside the Titan's mouth. After Zeke said everything he wanted to say, he then tells the Titans that they can continue to eat him. Miche then goes on to meet a similar fate to Nanaaba and is just ripped apart and eaten alive. It was by far the most brutal scene in Attack on Titan.